Well, today I've got a nice, beautiful, free block of mystery wood from my local mantle shop. I really encourage everybody to find a mantle shop where you live and be friends with them and go over and see what they're throwing away as cutoffs in their pile. Gonna turn this into something pretty today, and I'm really excited. Anyway, here we go. Using my high-tech template, I'm going to get the corners gone and put a faceplate on for some good control and stability. I'll start roughing the outside corners just to see if I can get it in balance a little bit better and start my shaping. This wood was very dry and old. I noticed some cracks, but not going to really bother me until I really get into it. I'm going to start flattening the bottom now and seeing what it looks like underneath. We'll make a little rough area for the tenon and for what will be my foot and get those nice and cleaned up. Wanted to start working on the outside a little bit and getting rid of some of the rougher bits. Starting to see the shape come in a little bit more, or at least at this point what I think I'm going to want the shape to be, because I never really plan it out. I'm starting to realize now that this is pine. I didn't know what it was before, and that it has some beautiful figure to it. I'm going to do some sanding and get it buffed and cleaned. I use a very fine steel wool and 2 different grades of Scotch pad to get a really nice surface before I do any finish oiling or anything like that. Looking very pretty and shiny without putting any product on, so I know I've got a good smooth surface. I love pure beeswax. It's about as natural and food safe as it gets. You put a little on, put the speed up so you get some good heat and friction, and it just melts down onto the wood and gets a really pretty shiny finish. We're going to turn this around, get that faceplate off, and start working on the inside. Going to flatten out the the top. Get this thing nice and true and start my hollowing process. I decided to go ahead and use a Forstner bit to drill out the center and set my depth that way. Also saved me some time with a lot of hollowing because this is a pretty decent size and heavy piece of wood. This wood turned very easily, and this is where the title of the video kind of came to me, is why don't people turn pine more often? I know that we typically overlook it as wood turners, but if you get a nice piece and it's not full of bug holes and that sort of thing, it can really be quite lovely. A lot of times I'll do my finish inside work with a carbide tool and my scraper, just to get rid of any tool marks and to really give me a nice surface to reduce my sanding. Wanted to clean up the very top edge a little bit before I moved on to some sanding. And I'm going to end up repeating the same process I did on the outside. Very fine steel wool, medium Scotch pad, and a very fine Scotch pad to give me a real nice surface before I put on my beeswax. Turn up the speed, give it a little pressure, and let the heat kind of break down that beeswax. It gives it a really beautiful shine. And again, food safe, excellent. So we'll get this off now and start working on removing that tenon. That'll be next. I use a vacuum chuck as a jam chuck because it fits right on the inside of this bowl nicely and gives it some really good stability. I went to the drill press and drilled out the right size for my branding token, and we'll attach that now. CA glue, and I spray the bottom of the wood token so it adheres right away. And there you have it, folks. Really hope you liked it, and I hope you give some pine a chance, because I think it's worth it. Beautiful stuff. Hey there, friends, welcome back. So today we're going to be working with a nice little chunk of red cedar. It's got cracks, it's got old bug damage, it's got all kinds of craziness going on. And to make it even more interesting, I decided to turn this piece end grain, which I've never done before. This should be fun. I'm excited to get going. When I trimmed this a little bit, the red color on the inside was terrific. I'm hoping we see a lot of that as we go forward. So this piece was rescued from the trash pile at my local custom mantle shop that's near my home. And if you haven't heard me say it before, I really encourage you guys to find a mantle shop near you. Be nice to them, make them something, and go back there and check every once in a while to see what they have, because it's amazing the pieces that they throw away that we as wood turners are going to love. So as I was getting into this piece, it became apparent how long this thing has been sitting inside this mantle shop. Gosh knows how long, but I don't know if it's possible to have no moisture content, but holy smokes, this was the driest piece of wood I've ever worked with. I did have to switch to a carbide tool. So those of you that are purists, please cut me some slack. Literally every time I took a pass on the bottom, I had to go sharpen my bowl gouge. A lot of that is because it's end grain, so it's going to be tougher, but boy oh boy, this was some dry wood, and did it dull the tools. Really seeing lots of beautiful figuring now. Kind of getting excited to see how this is going to turn out. Those of you who have seen my videos before, you know I don't mind imperfections and voids, and I'm not going to take it down to nothing just to get rid of a crack. So we're going to see a lot of those in here, I'm sure. Finished up with some abrasive paste, and now it's time to turn it around and start working on the inside. That big void, I'm just kind of waiting to see how it presents itself when I hollow out, but my inclination at this point is to leave it, and as long as it's not compromising the integrity of the piece. Really dry. So this was a little bit more of a challenge, again, because I am turning end grain, which makes it a little bit more difficult even under ideal conditions, and because this was so dry. But the carbide tools really made short work of it relatively. And I was able to actually finish this piece in just a couple hours, rather than presenting a 10-hour video for you guys working with my bowl gouges. Trying to make sure I get my depth just right, and making sure that I don't do anything that's going to make that void open up more. Decided to clean it up a little bit, and it looked like it was pretty solid, felt like it was pretty solid. So that's going to stay. The cracks, though, they actually worried me more than that void. So I'm going to put a little black CA and fill those up a little bit. This, I'm just kind of going through very, very lightly with the carbide tool to get rid of that CA glue and make it a lot easier to do my finish sanding on the inside, not have to contend with the glue. So we'll go through and sand up to about 400 grit. My normal preferred method after sanding is to go through with a fine steel wool, a medium Scotch pad, and then a fine Scotch pad. And that's before I put on any kind of abrasive paste or oils or wax or anything like that. It gives me a nice smooth finish, and without even putting any product on. Little abrasive paste. I kind of kept staring straight down into the middle of the bowl because that's the circles, the rings were a little mesmerizing to me. So now we need to get this out and get rid of that tenon. If you have access to a vacuum chuck, use that as a jam chuck if you get the opportunity. It makes it so much easier because it's mounted to your headstock, and you don't have to worry about a jam chuck being off center or anything like that. It's just true, and you just set your piece on there, and anyway, works really well. Highly recommend it. And like most of the time, I will get rid of that little nub at the drill press when I drill out for my branding token that I'll put on at the end, so I don't worry about it at this point. Just trying to get the bottom concaved and get it cleaned up and smooth so I can finish it completely. So back at my shop, and we'll put the branding token on and get a little Danish oil on this, let it sit for about 20-30 minutes and wipe it up, and we'll be good to go. I really appreciate everybody. If you've watched the videos before, thank you for coming back. Those of you that are new to the channel, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Please like and comment, especially comment. I really want to hear what you folks think. I love the suggestions that you guys get. I am a novice wood turner, and I'm still learning every single day, so any suggestions are really appreciated. Photos are coming up next, so stick around for those. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I really appreciate your support. Have a great day. Welcome back, everyone. Well, the idea was to take these bamboo pieces and make a really colorful platter. Um, Initially, what I had thought was I'll take some good tape and put it on the bottom of each one of these pieces and stand them up and pour epoxy resin in them and pour more around them. Let me say right off the bat, this is not the way to make sure your epoxy stays in the bamboo, as you will see coming up very soon. But this is what I did, so I thought I would show you. So I grouped them all together, and the idea was, oh, I'll just pull these apart, and when it sets, and then arrange them in the platter the way I liked, and I'll have this really cool thing. And not exactly how it worked out. Everything was going great, and seemed like all the pieces of bamboo were holding the epoxy resin just fine. Clearly, that's not how it ended up. So yeah, I came back to find everything had spilled out. And this is actually after topping them off several times so they at least would be full. You'll see behind this container where I'm mixing up my epoxy resin that's going to go around the bamboo. Everything looks all pretty. I did not show the footage of the 5 to 6 hours it took to actually chip off the blue epoxy resin from the bamboo and hand sand every one of these pieces to get the epoxy resin and the red tape off of the bamboo. Anyway, don't do what I did. Hey everyone, well today we're going to finally get this piece on the lathe that I've been preparing for about the last month or so, and I'm really excited to see if we can get a nice platter out of this. The idea would be to shape it up right about to the edge of these larger bamboo pieces, so when you're looking at the outside we'll be able to see the blue of the resin there, and then just make this a nice shallow platter. So anyway, that's the game plan. Let's get rolling. So this piece started off just great. Of course, lots of epoxy resin, so lots of chip out. But that's okay. That can all get smoothed up later. But it did present some challenges once I got it turned around, which you will see as we go forward. It was really fun though to kind of stop, look, see if I needed to take a little bit more. The idea was to be able to expose all the rings of the bamboo, and when I got to the sides here, decide, how much to take off, how much to leave on, so I would still see the sides of those large bamboo pieces. What was planned to be a nice platter is ultimately, as you'll see, going to turn into a little bit more of a plate. But I was pleased how it came out. You'll see that coming up. Shear scraping, most of the work I did was with a 1/2-inch bowl gouge. The carbide tools were not working as well as I had expected, so I ended up using the conventional tools a whole lot more. Going to establish a tenon here so I can turn this around and be able to work on the inside. I learned a lot doing this piece. This was my first attempt at doing anything like this. If I were to do this again, I would have not put a tenon on the bottom because I was going to be going so shallow on the inside. I would have put a waste block on the bottom, and that way I wouldn't have lost any of that depth. But, you know, live and learn. It's just a little isopropyl alcohol, make sure I got all the dust off, and also see if I could get a nice first look at what this is going to look like when it's finished. Time to turn it around and start leveling that wonderful top. Lots of fun. Really just took my time and tried to take very, very light cuts until I could get down to one solid surface. And it actually did not take that long, just made sure to keep my 1/2-inch bowl gouge nice and sharp and take it easy. Seemed like it took forever to get this to a nice flat top to where I could even start dishing this out or hollowing. But that's just probably me being impatient. So I knew when I was doing this that I needed to sand the outside of each piece of bamboo to make sure that it adhered, or the epoxy resin adhered to the bamboo. You also need to sand the inside of each piece, in my opinion, because every single one of those blue dots at one point or another, when I was just flattening the surface or actually kind of dishing and hollowing it out, came loose. And I had to stop, glue it up on the inside, get it as level as I could, return it. It was really a pain. One of them flew about 40 feet away, took about half an hour to find it. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, sand the outside and sand the inside of your bamboo to make sure all the epoxy resin adheres to them. Going to start kind of dishing this out, making my nice shallow platter design on the inside, and getting to what will be a little bit more of my final shape. As I move forward, I end up kind of switching over to a 3/8-inch bowl gouge because I can get just a little bit cleaner, slower cuts with that. The 1/2-inch bowl gouge wants to be a little bit more aggressive. So you'll see me switch to that here and there. Again, you're not seeing all the times that I stop and, oh, there's another loose one, there's another loose one. It all works out in the end, but boy, oh boy, if I had thought about that one thing, would have saved myself a whole lot of time. all in all, this was not a very difficult turn, with the exception of the blue pieces popping out all over the place. It cooperated very, very well. I obviously just made sure that the epoxy resin was very cured, and it worked out great. But like with most of the turnings, you know, don't get aggressive. Take your time. Stop and check. Make sure you're where you need to be, and adjust as you go. Time to get that tailstock gone and work on the very center so we can get to some sanding and finish this piece up. Get to what will be the final look. Lots of fun just kind of exposing the, oh, and here's another one. Exposing the bamboo pieces and making sure that all the features are going to show. Doing some finish cuts with that 3/8 inch bull gouge. Get that as clean as possible and hopefully reduce my sanding by doing that. Time to put a little sandpaper on it and see if we can get it to a finished form. Much of this was done by hand because of all the little blue dots being loose and having to be resecured, so it's okay. Little fine steel wool, medium Scotch pad, and fine Scotch pad. To kind of smooth it out nicely. Sanding paste toward the end. Give us an even smoother surface, obviously. You can see that circle in the middle, which I do not like at all, was where I had cut in for my tenon, and why I said I would, when I do this again, I'll use a waste block so we don't see that. I did ultimately refill that with orange epoxy resin so it's not so pronounced, but bothered the heck out of me. Thank you everybody for watching. Finished photos are coming up, and I will see you again soon. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back again. Today we're going to be working with a very heavy, rather wet piece of wood that again I rescued from the trash pile at my local mantle shop. Going to get the faceplate on, make sure it's nice and secure, especially because this thing is so heavy. Probably about 30 pounds. Going to start by working on the corners and seeing if I can get this into round and stop it from wobbling so much. I really appreciate everyone taking the time and watching this video, by the way, or any of my videos. The support means a lot. Thank you. Going to keep working on getting this true, and that will allow me to be able to start working on the actual shape. Got to get the bottom squared away here as well. Nice and flat. And I'm going to start bringing my corners up and start giving me a little bit more of the shape that I'm looking for today. Noticing this has some really cool grain to it. Need to start getting the bottom situated and start kind of defining where the tenon, in this case, and the foot are going to be. The fact that this piece was so wet when I really got into it kept kind of messing with me and making me change my mind about what I wanted to do. But finally, I think I'd arrived at a shape that I think will be really nice. Doing a lot of shear scraping, get rid of my tool marks, and give it a nice smooth line on the exterior shape. Going to do a little bit of sanding now. I won't show you a whole bunch of that because it's boring. And get ready to be able to turn this around. Sanding was a little challenging again because of the moisture content, but I find if you just are a little patient, it works out great. This is my normal way of finishing off after my sanding. I use a very fine steel wool, a medium Scotch pad, and then a real fine Scotch pad. It gives me a really nice smooth surface. I'm going to put on a little bit of sanding paste. This happens to be Brad's. Works terrific. Great value, by the way. Really brought the color of the grain out, and I'm starting to see this starburst pattern on the sides of the piece that I'm really starting to like. We're going to get this off and we're going to get it turned around next. Get that faceplate off, put a chuck on that tenon, and mount it back up the other way so I can start working on the top and start my hollowing process. This thing was cut pretty nicely, so I didn't have a whole lot to do here, so I was able to kind of move right to the hollowing because the top surface got flat very quickly. I really enjoy the hollowing like a lot of people do. It seems very satisfying to me. Take my time. Don't rush things. And it's actually very enjoyable. as I'm sure a lot of you know, and those of you that don't turn, you should consider taking a class at a local wood shop or a woodworking guild or something, because I think you'd really enjoy it. This hollowing seemed to kind of go forever. This is a rather deep bowl. It was about 12 inches when it was all done, and seemed like the hollowing went on, but finally got to the depth I needed. Again, some sanding, and I'll kind of repeat the process with the, and this is a technique I learned from Kent, and his channel is called Turn a Wood Bowl. Regular wood glue on very fine cracks, smush it into the crack, and then immediately sand with the grain, and it handles your fine cracks really well. Thank you, Kent. I'll put a link to his channel. Now we're going to go back to the very fine steel wool. Gives me a really fine grit finish sand after I've done my sanding. And then I will move on to like a medium fine Scotch pad, and then a very fine white Scotch pad. Some more of the Brad sanding paste, bring out the color and to really give me a smoother finish. Product is actually really good, in my opinion. And right about now I'm thinking, that'll do. That looks pretty darn good, I think. So we're going to get this off, and now the last thing we really need to do is get rid of that tenon and finish the bottom. I'm going to use a vacuum chuck as a jam chuck. I just won't attach the vacuum to it. Because of the size of the bowl, it fit in there really nice and it gave terrific stability. So it doesn't always have to be a piece of wood. Pressure from the tailstock, and you're good to go. Getting rid of that tenon, finishing the bottom. And don't worry about that nub, because I'm going to take that off at the drill press when I drill down to put in my branding emblem. So I just did that, and I'm just going to use a little CA glue, and then I spray the backside of my token with the activator. The wood sucks it up nicely, and we are done. Again, folks, if you made it to the very end, I really appreciate you taking your time to watch the video. Thank you so much for the support. Please leave comments, negative or positive. I really welcome them all. I'll see you next time. Well, what we've got today is a big, beautiful cherry burl. It measures about 16 inches this way and about 9 inches width. It's very dry.
It's been sitting for the better part of 20 years, untouched, and today we're going to make something nice out of this. I'm going to trim a little bit off this side here, but I'm going to try to keep this as natural as I can. So anyway, stand by, let's get to turning.
So the first thing I need to do is get this thing between centers. I use a small Forstner bit. I need to get down past that bark. So I've got some good solid wood to make this thing secure and safe, because this was kind of a chunky, wobbly burl for sure. Wasn't sure if it was going to shake the whole machine apart, so going good. Going to start getting past that bark nice and slow. See what's underneath and kind of start deciding what shape I want to start leaning this piece toward. It's crazy that I was getting even though this is just bark mostly, I'm getting lots and lots of dust. This piece was so dry. The gentleman I got it from said it had been sitting in his shed for almost 20 years or 20 years or more. And boy, oh boy, he wasn't lying. Very dry, dusty piece. Flattening off the bottom, trying to set up my tenon and foot so I can turn this around and get it in a chuck so it's a little bit more stable. Really deciding if I'm going to leave it oblong at this point, and that's a lot of natural bark, and maybe give it a bowl shape, but keep the wings. Again, at this point I'm still just deciding. For as dry as it was, this was a very easy turn, to be honest. The wood was a pleasure to work with. This is my second time turning a cherry burl. I made the decision at this point to part off the wings and give this a little bit more of a traditional bowl shape, because the wings itself were very fragile, loose, lots of bark, and I thought, the pretty figured burl wood is what I wanted to focus on, so don't hate me. That's what I decided to do. We're going to start giving it some sanding now, getting ready to turn it around. I always sand to about 400 grit, and then I kind of do my standby, which is very fine steel wool, medium Scotch pad, and a very fine Scotch pad. And it gives a real nice, shiny, smooth surface. We'll get this turned around in the chuck and start flattening the top, and I can start moving toward the hollowing process. Very wobbly here, but it eventually cooperated. There was that really good sized void in the front. It was kind of throwing me off as to where do I go in? How do I not take a big chunk out accidentally or get a catch? So it was more just take a little look, take a little look, and see where the piece of wood wanted to go. I started noticing that there were some very loose bits of the bark, so I decided to use some CA to stabilize that a bit more, because I definitely wanted to keep that as part of the rim. Now I'm starting to get down, and I always want to know where my depth is going to be so I don't mess up and make the bottom too shallow, because I always want to leave a little bit of room to drill out for my branding emblem on the bottom. So I try to leave the bottom a little thicker, so it gives me some extra wiggle room to do that. Again, even as dry as this piece of wood was, it really cooperated well and was very pleasant to turn, aside from all the dust. Definitely had my respirator on with filtration, not just for the sanding. I used a skew on the inside because that edge was so darn sharp. And I thought, that's not pleasant to pick up and touch. So rounded that a little bit, like that a lot more. And now we're going to set up and start doing some sanding. It'll be very much the same process, sand up to about 400 grit. And I'll use the fine steel wool, medium Scotch pad, fine Scotch pad. A lot of times I'll use a sanding paste, but because of all the voids and everything, it would just get stuck into everything, so I did not do that. I'll use a jam chuck, or excuse me, I'll use a vacuum chuck as a jam chuck. I find that if it's possible, I try to use that because it gives a lot of stability instead of a piece of wood, because it's actually mounted to the lathe. And I'll get rid of that nub when I go to the drill press to use a Forstner bit to drill out my branding emblem. I do like the Brad's tongue wax. Terrific product. Let it sit for about 20-30 minutes before you take it off. Wipe off the excess. It's beautiful. You can do more than one coat, obviously, but at this point I'm just kind of staring at the grain, and the figuring of this burl is so pretty to me. I really tend to like rustic, I think, and pieces that have natural voids and inclusions. I do fill with some pieces, but when I have a piece like this that just has so much character, I really kind of just tend to leave it alone. Um, Again, personal preference. I do these things because I like them. Um, and obviously it's, again, preference of mine. Nice rustic cherry burl bowl, suitable for the table or countertop. Thank you so much for watching, guys. See you again soon. Nice little olive wood blank with a big void all the way through. With some really pretty grain. Should be very nice. Hey guys, so I drove by my local mantle shop again to check their trash pile, and I found this nice big chunk of beech. Apparently, I only saw this. Apparently, the mantle itself they were selling for over $800, and I just snagged it. But I looked at the bottom, and oh, this amazing spalting. It's a good heavy piece. It's got some cracking, some good checking, but I think we can address that, no problem. And anyway, I'm really excited to see what we can do with this, and let's get going. So I wanted to have a faceplate on here for sure, just because of the weight of this blank. Getting it around that large crack was a lot of fun. So I definitely could have some good stability. This piece started off at about 12 inches across by 6 inches deep. Definitely sturdy. And but aside from the cracks and the checking, it didn't seem like it was going to be too much of a problem. So just kind of jumped right in and started getting it into round and seeing what I felt like I wanted the shape to end up. As I did more and more rounding, that really great spalting started really kind of jumping out more. It was really fun to kind of go a little more, and see what this piece of wood was going to offer me. Some of these cracks along here were starting to give me a little bit of anxiety, but typically not too scared. I figure it's going to be what it's going to be. So let's just keep moving along and see what it actually, if it actually turns out to be an issue or not. Many times we can turn past them. Many times they're not that hard to correct or to blend in when it comes right down to it. So I decided that I hadn't decided on the outside shape entirely yet, but I did decide that I wanted to have sort of a large foot area, because when the actual shape was done and it was sitting on a table, I wanted to make sure that it looked like it was sitting up above the table. Starting to kind of cut that foot in so it sort of mirrors the outside shape of the bowl itself. I was trying also just to keep it in round, or get it into round, and not really take too much size away from this blank. Definitely want to establish a good wide tenon on here, because in some of the larger pieces I've turned in the past, I ended up doing a real small tenon, and it, makes it a little harder for the chucks to hold it. So cut that foot in just a little bit more so it seems to complement the shape of the outside of the bowl a little bit better. A little bit of scraping with my skew to blend things and get rid of some tool marks. And again, still kind of checking for cracks. I had to kind of dig out some of the specs because these cracks along the outside were actually rather deep. And initially, I was going to just try to fill with CA glue, with black CA. It stained terribly and it didn't fill well enough. So what I did was mix up some 5-minute epoxy, and I used some of the shavings dust in there so the color would kind of match, and I ended up filling those larger cracks with that material instead. That ended up working out a whole lot better than just, keep putting in more CA and more CA and more CA. So just give this about 10-15 minutes to really cure up, and went through and used a scraper to just remove that excess epoxy resin from the outside, and then I could kind of move on to my sanding. Go to up to about a 400 grit, and with use all the different grits, and then I go through with my fine steel wool and Scotch pads. This is a little bit of isopropyl alcohol just to raise the grain before I use the Scotch pads and the steel wool. Then to really give it a finer finish, I used some of the Axe abrasive paste and turned up the speed a little bit to give it a really smooth finish when all was said and done. So happy with that for now, and we'll see about getting this turned around and put in the chuck to start working on the hollowing process and working on the inside. Initially, or earlier, I had said that about a large tenon. I meant a mortise. I ended up using that large recess in the back to really secure this on there. I definitely wasn't trusting that smaller tenon, so apologize for that. Every time I stopped to have a peek, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what's going to have to happen with these cracks. And I knew that I was going to be addressing these because, look, this was a beautiful piece of wood on what was probably a very expensive mantle that they tossed. And they tossed it for a reason, because a lot of it was pith and it showed a lot of cracks and checking, and it wasn't something they could sell. So when I get these pieces from the trash pile, I know that I'm going to be addressing some of these issues, but that's okay. As long as I'm not too OCD and things have to be exactly perfect, it works out great. There was one decent crack running through the center of this. You'll see it as I stop, and that did give me some pause. As it turns out, for the most part, I was able to just kind of keep going, and most of it turned away. So that was lucky, and I'll take it. Going to establish a depth now, And again, my thought with this was that it's, like a large, fruit bowl to sit on the counter, that kind of thing. So I wanted to keep it nice and wide, but I wasn't trying to make this thing, 6 inches deep, because it's not very practical. The wood turned great. No issues. Really, very, very little punky spots at all. Any of the tear out, to be quite honest, was user error on my part, and not necessarily the wood so much. Me being a little bit too aggressive with my cuts. Now we'll just try to get get everything smooth and feeling like it's a good interior design. That negative rake scraper seems to help quite a lot. The inside cracks, I did just do the CA. These are the ones that I filled with the epoxy resin, the 5-minute. They literally went all the way through, but because the outside was sealed up with epoxy, I could just use a little bit of black CA. Worked out great, and the black lines they created seemed to kind of match with the spalting. So we'll do my initial sanding and up to about 400 grit again, and get some isopropyl alcohol on it to raise the grain, get rid of all that dust, and also get a little peek at what it's going to look like. Let that dry, and then on to the steel wool and medium Scotch pad, fine Scotch pad, before I do any kind of sanding paste or anything like that. More of the Axe abrasive paste to give us about 1,000 grit finish when all is said and done. Get our speed up a little bit, and kind of keep wiping with clean portions of your paper towel till you don't see any product on there at all. So now we need to get this turned around. I definitely did not want to leave the foot looking like that. I knew I could do something a little nicer, so I decided to kind of cut it in a bit. And it'll still give me a high look when it's sitting on the table, but it can be a little nicer, a little sleeker on the bottom there when somebody turns it over, and still give me the same effect. So that's what I did. I left that interior portion because that will be just the right size for my branding emblem and be a little different than anything I've done in the past. Quick sand, and then also the steel wool and Scotch pads and a little abrasive paste also to bring out the color and make it match with the rest. Really want to thank everybody for taking their time to watch. Please stick around after to the end. The finished photos will be up last, and please leave your comments and suggestions in the bottom. I really enjoy reading those and responding back to everybody. Have a great day. So when I pulled this little chunk of walnut out of the trash, a couple people told me that there was no way I could turn it into anything useful. So, challenge accepted. Welcome back, everyone. Got a nice little piece of black walnut that I rescued from the trash bin, and it measured about 6 inches across and about 2.5 inches thick. I really just couldn't leave it sitting there. It had beautiful grain, had that nice area where the branch was going into it, which really meant it was going to be pretty inside in my mind. So I thought, let's just put it on the lathe and see what it can become and see if I can give this a new life. Going to go ahead and put a mortise or a recess in the bottom so I don't lose any depth, because there really wasn't much to work with, obviously. I love walnut. I mean, most of us really do. It's always gorgeous, and no piece is ever the same. So again, just couldn't let this go to waste. And a nice big chunk of the bark just literally stopped my lathe. I was kind of hoping it would stay on both sides, so I tried to turn it without popping it off, but no dice. Just wanted to establish a nice little foot area and start getting a little bit of shape to it. I really was kind of looking at some kind of a very shallow, obviously oblong dish or something like that. Just wanted to see what the piece of wood would allow me to do. More bark coming off. Get a little sanding going and see if we can get this nice and smooth so we can turn it around. So again, I really didn't at this point know what I wanted to hopefully let this become, but I know it's going to be pretty when it's done. This was a pretty dry piece, not a whole lot of moisture in it, so turned very evenly and no issues whatsoever. Really start our hollowing process now, which is actually one of my favorite portions of a turn to do. I know at this point there were couple people maybe looking over my shoulder. And I gotta say, I had a little bit of satisfaction knowing that this was actually going to turn into something. Ha ha ha. Little negative rake scraper. Start doing some finish sanding, probably take this up to about a 400 grit, and then work a little with the fine steel wool and the medium Scotch pad and fine Scotch pad before I put any kind of sanding paste or oil on it at all. Had a ton of chatoyance to it when you turned it. You should be able to see it in a moment here. Just a really pretty piece of wood. Really would have been a shame. Get rid of that little nub on the bottom and put a little finish on there as well. Again, just super pretty. And again, the whole idea with this was to give a piece of scrap wood a new life and a new purpose. And I think I did. Stay tuned for the finished pics, and here is what the purpose of my little walnut piece is now. Well, today I'm looking forward to this. Today we're going to be working with a beautiful walnut burl. This came off a big log, and the gentleman that milled it did not want the burl growth, and of course I was happy to have it. Not exactly sure what kind of shape we're going to take today, but I'm thinking it's going to be beautiful. So first order of business is get this bark off, really see what's underneath and what I'll be working with. I'd never actually done this before, so many portions of working with this piece are a first. Cleaned up very nicely. Lots of pointy bits and lots of intimidating little ridges and valleys, and yeah, but exciting to be working with a piece of wood like this. Got to get this thing mounted and faceplate for sure, so I've got the maximum stability and safety working with this piece. Getting this put onto the lathe and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it. Caption says it all. I'm thinking, boy oh boy, those little spikes are very sharp and pointy. What did I get myself into? At the same time, kind of can't wait. Tailstock support for sure, and going to start rounding the bottom. I always knew that this was going to be the bottom of the piece because the burl figuring went all the way through, so I wasn't worried about losing any of that beautiful grain and figuring. This piece really was not difficult to work with. It was just taking my time, going slow, checking, and seeing where I was along the way. Certainly not rushing anything. I think at this point, I'm kind of thinking I need to start establishing some kind of a foot and tenon and getting this thing, again, more in round. Definitely decided on a tenon for when I turn it around into the chuck. The wood was a little bit punky, and realizing that was going to be the only thing holding this thing on at some point, I enforced it with some CA glue just to be on the safe side. I'm going to start getting a little bit more of the shape now, seeing how much I can put into it as far as a bowl shape without compromising the wings that I really wanted to leave as natural looking as I could. So a lot of stopping and checking. I will say that it was distracting because every time I stopped, I just wanted to kind of stare at the figuring and it was a little mesmerizing, and I kept thinking to myself, I need to get back to this and finish. But really, really beautiful. I'd never worked with a piece of wood like this. Getting a little bit more of bowl shape that I think I'm going to be going for, and trying to kind of define that shape now. Most of the work I'm doing, I'm using a 1/2-inch bowl gouge. I'm real comfortable with that tool for shear scraping and for getting bulk off. There was one wing that was cut straight and it was longer than the other, and so I turned with a carbide tool to bring it down a little bit smoother, knowing that it wasn't going to be natural anyway. So I'm going to start doing some initial sanding and finished with steel wool and Scotch pads to give it a real nice smooth feel and look. Time to get this turned around and put on a chuck and start working on the top and the hollowing. Flattening out was not super difficult. Again, just took a lot of patience to go very slowly, especially when I'm working out toward the ends of the wings. It was a little unnerving. Again, I've never done that before. You'll see that in a moment. Watching the dark brown shavings come out when I was starting to hollow the inside was really something. Marking out where I think I should not go beyond, because I don't want to make those wings on the sides compromised and weak. So how much bowl can I get away with? This is where I really took my time and went slow and flattened out those wings in toward the bowl. I also had decided that I wanted to put some kind of a rim around the bowl itself, and you'll see that in just a moment. Stop, check, make sure I haven't gone too far, and I still have some wings on the edges and the sides. So a little shear scraping, 1/2 inch bowl gouge to take out some of the tool marks and also refine those wings so they're nice and flat. So I'm going to go ahead and start going deeper into the bowl and hollowing out at this point. Again, trusty 1/2 inch bowl gouge. I took away the tailstock support because at some point you have to. It was a little unnerving, I got to be honest with you, going, holy smokes, I hope that tenon holds up. My goal was to use a lot of pressure straight in toward the chuck and not side to side, because then it would reduce my risk of this thing coming off, because if it did, it would be probably disastrous. Setting my depth now and making sure I don't go too deep. I want to make sure that the bottom isn't too thin and I have room to use a drill press and put in my little branding emblem at the end. So again, taking my time, hollowing out, and to be honest, just really enjoying this turn from start to finish. It was really a pleasure. Nice big void in here. Decided to clean it out a bit, and I do have a tendency to leave pieces with natural inclusions and voids unless I'm really trying to make something, totally smooth. I really tend to like that. So it didn't bother me. We'll see what it's going to be when all is said and done, is kind of my attitude. But I rather like seeing the natural character of pieces of wood and what they decide they're going to be. Got my depth now, and I'm just trying to really get a nice smooth bowl feel. I'm also going to take a skew and I'm going to kind of round the edges on that rim, because they were particularly sharp, and with the little voids and everything, it would be, uncomfortable if it got picked up wrong. I reinforced with a little CA glue just to be on the safe side, because it was feeling a little loose. But it seemed like that's all it took, was just a little bit. Gonna run through with my handy dandy my fine steel wool, medium Scotch pad, and fine Scotch pad to give me a nice smooth feel. It definitely was not going to put any sanding paste on, because it would get stuck up in all the inclusions. I use a vacuum chuck as a jam chuck. It gives a lot of good stability when I'm taking off the tenon and I have to turn it around to do that. Need to make sure that this foot in the bottom area is definitely concaved, so when it's sitting, it's going to sit flat on its foot edges. So that's what I'm going to start working on here. It was a bit convex, so I had to really kind of change the whole shape of it, but not a big deal. Not worried about that nub because that's going to come off the drill press when I drill out for my branding emblem at the end. So it's kind of nice to do it that way because I can leave that tailstock support up the whole time and not feel like I'm obligated to get rid of that. Little finish sanding and polishing with the Scotch pads, and ready to put a little bit of, this is Brad's tongue oil. Really like this product. I do have a tendency to only put one coat on. I let it sit for a good 30 minutes or so before I wipe off the excess, because I tend to just prefer a little bit more of natural and almost matte kind of look when all is said and done. I love seeing pieces that are nice and shiny, but this seemed, with all the voids and inclusions, this seemed like something that needed to be a little bit more on the rustic side and a little bit more natural. Obviously these oils and that sort of thing will really bring out the colors and to be able to see the grain and figure, which of course I definitely wanted to see, but definitely was not going for something shiny. Again, this sits for about 20 to 30 minutes and then just paper towel off the excess. And that's usually my finished look. This piece did drink up a lot of the oil, it seemed like. I had to put a good amount on, and seemed like it was a bit thirsty, but that's okay. And obviously I won't put any of that oil into the center so I can glue in the branding emblem. Really appreciate everybody watching, taking your time to do so. The support for the channel, especially being brand new, is much appreciated. Time to put the my little branding emblem in there. Little CA glue, and then I spray the activator on the back of the wood emblem. And that's all she wrote. Kept staring at the grain and the figuring on this burl. It was just amazing to me. Again, thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing for more videos. Take care. Hey there, friends. So I had this idea of doing a project, but only using material that I could find on my property. We had a big storm here in South Carolina, Hurricane Helene, a little while back. So I've got one good black walnut tree that came down and some other stuff. And anyway, we're going to try to source all this stuff together and do something. And I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it'll be entertaining at the very least. Stay tuned. Here we go. So these are pine burls. They are all over the place. We had a bunch of dead pine trees come down during the storm, and the dead branches were littered with these. When you cut them open, they're just beautiful. So I really wanted to do something with these. So what I decided to do was take one of the black walnut limbs. I kind of cut some cookies and put them on the bottom of this bowl form. And the idea was to put these pine burls all around the outside. So when this was turned into a bowl, inside and out, you would see the beauty of these really cool and very common pine burls. So that's what I did. It took a little bit of time, but it wasn't really difficult. I just kind of winged it a bit as far as the design and just put as many in there as I could. I'm going to mix up some resin, and I decided I wanted to do something a little on the darker side. I used a black, but I didn't mix it with a ton of pigment, so it wouldn't be, super, super dark. By the way, I did mix it much more than what you just saw. I just didn't think you needed to see a bunch of stirring. So the bowl and the rock in the middle is to displace as much of that material as possible so I don't have to use as much resin. Getting this on the lathe now, and I did not use any mold release because it wouldn't have worked with the hot glue. So I just decided to turn it away. This is my first time doing this. This wasn't fun. It really kind of hurt, actually. If any of you have ever ridden a motorcycle on the freeway and been hit by a little bug or a rock, yeah, that's what this was like. So I couldn't get rid of that darn exterior bowl fast enough, and but once I did, I was able just to kind of focus on exposing the black walnut cookies and, of course, the pine burls. And it was really kind of coming along fun and really nice, and it was fun the whole way, just watching these become more and more obvious and exposed. Needed to get a nice tenon on the bottom so we could turn this around and put it in the chuck. But I also wanted to be conscious of not going in too far and far enough. Again, just stopping and checking, making sure that I could see the features that I had placed in the original form. The whole time I was turning this, it was really, really cool because you could just smell the pine. The black walnut cookies I had put in a toaster oven for a couple hours to dry them out nicely, but because the pine burls came off these very, very dead limbs, I really thought they were all dry. Turns out they weren't 100% dry. I think next time I'll probably, when I use them again, I'll put them in toaster oven too. But it worked out, and it wasn't sappy or anything like that. Gonna put some sanding paste on here to kind of really start polishing this out. And it was kind of worrying me that it looked very, very dark. But I knew that it would lighten up a little bit once I got to the inside. So turning this around, again, lots of fun getting that, turning away that inside bowl, because I chipped away as much as I could, but it just, had to be turned away ultimately. And then it was just the job of taking my time and making sure I didn't take the side walls too thin, but I definitely got enough of the epoxy resin away to expose the pine burls and also the black walnut at the bottom. Really glad that I went and put those in the toaster oven, the black walnut, because they definitely needed to be dried out a bit more. Carbide tools were very, very useful on this project because they get through the epoxy resin a whole lot easier. And the bowl gouges work just fine too, but you have to sharpen so much. It takes so much time. I'm going to go ahead and get this to about a 400 grit, all the way up to about a 400 grit, and then we'll go through with some more sanding paste and my normal, Scotch pads and steel wool process. Really fun seeing this kind of come to life and work out the way I kind of pictured it in my mind. This is just a little bit of polish to give it a little bit of finer look altogether. I wet sanded with 1000 grit. Thank you everybody for watching. Please leave your comments below. I really love hearing the suggestions and how this could have been maybe different. I don't take any of that poorly, so please offer them up. And thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Today we're going to be working with a big old hunk of ambrosia maple. This thing is pretty good size. It's got some, looks like old worm or bug damage. We'll see how much that's going to affect us. But it also has some really pretty spalting I can see already. So anyway, gonna get this thing trimmed up a little bit and see if we can make something beautiful out of it. Stay tuned. After getting this piece trimmed up a little bit and especially knocking those corners off, first order of business was to get a faceplate on here to secure it to the lathe. This was no small thing as I was lifting it up, because even at this point it was still, I believe, around 25 pounds, which anyway, pretty sturdy blank, but I figure we'll just chip away and go slow. And first order of business would be to start getting a little bit of a shape and getting this into round. So hopefully I can turn the speed up a bit. Start flattening out my bottom here, which is also going to help me to be able to turn the speed up a bit. I'm noticing that spalting I was seeing in the beginning now is, I think, going to be pretty pronounced. I specifically didn't want to show a whole bunch of this, the rounding and the truing of the piece, because it did take quite some time and I didn't think it was very interesting footage, but here's some. Moisture content on this piece, when I checked, it was well under 7%, so this had been sitting for quite some time in the shop of the gentleman that gave it to me. It turned actually very well. No big surprises. Seeing some cracks and some imperfections, but to be expected a bit. Trying to decide what I'm going to do with those voids, and I will address those going forward. At this point, I'm kind of feeling like I want to do a larger hollow form kind of bowl shape. So I'm going to start working toward a little bit more of a sphere with this blank. The whole time I'm doing this, I'm thinking, oh boy, this is going to make it a little harder to hollow, but I think it'll be pretty, and it's a good way to spend the afternoon, so why not? Little shear scraping to remove some bulk and also get tool marks out. I used a Dremel tool to open up some of these knot holes and cracks, and I'm going to fill them with some 5-minute epoxy so they don't split more. And also, I did not know how far they went in, so I wanted to make sure I addressed those as I started pouring the epoxy in. I'm realizing, oh holy smokes, these actually go in quite a ways. All the fun of it. Roll with it and keep going. I'm going to mark out for a tenon, and I decided I would do a little bit more of a wider foot, because I kind of like the idea of when this is sitting on the table, it would look like it was sitting up a little bit. Again, really starting to see that spalting, and I'm getting ready to turn this around now. This really did test the lathe, because this was one heavy chunk. Thought I'd try to save myself some time and set some depth a little bit, but also take out some of the material in the center with the Forstner bit and start the long process of hollowing in this particular piece anyway. This took quite some time, and I realize that as I was doing this, I really needed a steady rest, even though this is not the optimum shape to use one, because as I was hollowing, I could hear that, not that it was barely holding on, but that I should not be going very aggressive with my cuts. So I went very slowly, and so as not to launch this piece out of the chuck. But it did take quite some time, actually several hours. I'm going to do some sanding, and I usually will take the sanding to about a 400 grit, and then I go through with a very fine steel wool, a medium Scotch pad, and a real fine Scotch pad. I will say that I really thought that I knew this was going to be kind of heavy, that I had taken the walls down thin enough. I really wished I had kind of gone a little thinner, but I did know that this was going to be a heavier piece anyway. But it did turn out, in all honesty, to be a little bit heavier than I intended. I'm going to use some of the Brad's sanding paste to give it about 1,000 grit finish after my steel wool and Scotch pads. And I'll also use some of the Brad's tung oil on there at the end. Terrific figuring and a lot of character to this piece of wood. A lot more than I thought I would see. I've turned ambrosia maple before, but this is definitely a little nicer than what I've come across in the past. Time to get the tenon gone and start finishing the bottom. And again, I typically will leave the very bottom thick enough so I can leave that nub, continue to have tailstock support, and take it off at the drill press and use the exact size I need to put my branding token on the bottom. Gonna put a little of the tung oil wax now, really starting to see what this piece is made of at this point. Really, really pretty. I think I overdid it on the tung oil a bit. I usually leave this to sit for about 20-30 minutes and then just wipe off the excess. I really appreciate everybody taking the time, if you've made it to the end, watching the video, and I really appreciate all the support from everybody. Please consider subscribing and hit that thumbs up button, please. And this piece, as well as several others, are for sale, and there'll be a link in the description to my Etsy store. Just click on that and check it out. Time to put the branding token on and call it a day. Thank you again, everybody. I really appreciate all the support, especially being brand new. More to come, and hope everybody has a great day. Well, welcome back everyone. I hope you're doing well. We're starting off today with a nice little chunk of olive wood measured about 6" by 6" by 5" high. And as the title suggested, I'm going to attempt to make a nice little keepsake box for my niece for her birthday. So that's what we're doing today, and let's see how we go. Going to get a tenon on both ends so I can eventually part this off from base to lid and have something to put into a chuck. Now that we've got the tenons on both ends, it's time to get one of them into a chuck so I can not just work on this between centers. I love working with olive wood. So far in my very limited experience, there's no such thing as an ugly piece of olive. The nicest thing about it, if you haven't turned olive, in my opinion, is the smell. It has this very distinct smell when you're turning it, when you're working with it. Anyway, it's lovely. This is ultimately going to turn out to be, and my plan was to have this be more of a shallow box. I definitely did not need to start with as high of a piece. Like I said, I believe it was about 5". But anyway, that's what I had. So that's what we'll work with. Need to establish a foot. So when I do turn this around, the chuck has a nice spot to seat up against. Safety first. Kind of marking out to where the bottom base is going to be. To your right is that bottom line is going to be essentially the bulk of the base. And now I need to get this parted off so I can start working on the base and then matching up and fitting the lid. Olive, particularly nice dry olive like this, I find it's really pleasurable to turn. No surprises, and seems to cooperate really, really well. Now that we have the base set, time to just shore up the outside shape, and then we will start the hollowing process. This I'm doing with a skew a little bit. So I need to set a bit of a recess in here to where the lid will ultimately rest, and then I'll go a little bit to the right and start hollowing from there. All I need is just a little bit of a shelf, because the plan for this one is that the lid will sit fully on the inside. It won't match up with the outside dimensions of the base. Just kind of touching up that rim a little bit because I think I nicked it. I want to make sure that I touch it up with that with the square carbide. Make sure that my lid ultimately has a nice flat shelf to sit on. A lot of times I'll use my round carbide tool just to do some elimination of tool lines and that sort of thing. Almost like a scraper. Well, essentially a carbide tool is a scraper, but I like the control of it. But we will go through with a negative rake scraper and just make sure everything is nice and smooth, so it eliminates a lot of our sanding. So we'll go up to about a 400 grit on this piece. And I'm going to use some of the Axe abrasive paste to give it a nice, really smooth surface, and also, you know, it kind of deepens the color of the wood and lets us really look at what this piece is going to look like ultimately. Keep wiping until, with the clean portions of your paper towel or cloth, until you don't see any product coming on to your paper towel, and then you know you're good. Yeah, like I said, there's no such thing as an ugly piece of olive wood. So time to take this off and get what will be our lid on there now. So this portion that I'm working on right now will be, ultimately will be the bottom of the lid. What's gonna go into the base. Just take a little, make sure it fits, take a little, check to see if it fits. Once you get the dimension right, I just made everything the same on the outside. And we do need to hollow this out a little bit so it isn't so heavy, but also I'm going to use a square carbide tool right here, and this will allow me to use the top here, this portion, as a mortise, as a recess, so I can turn it around, put it in the chuck, and work on what will be the top of this lid and have it secured on the lathe. So same thing, up to about 400. Decided to put a little bit of detail. So burning in lines, everybody has their way. I like using laminate. You can pick these up at any big hardware store as samples. They've got nice sharp corners, and they burn lines in really well. Playing cards work well also, but these are a lot firmer, and you can get in there a little bit deeper, in my opinion. Little Axe abrasive paste now, and getting ready to turn it around so we can work on the top of the lid next. So we'll expand the jaws, running pretty true. Initially, I had decided I was going to use a piece of, and if you look at the thumbnail, there's a piece of bloodwood on top of this blank. and I was going to inset it as a large puck. And I decided to go a whole different direction with the design because I found a nice little trinket that I could use and inset into this lid instead, and I thought my niece would like it better. You'll see that toward the end. Making sure that it feels good to hold, and that there's, it's not going to slip out of the hand when you go to pick it up and pull the lid off. This is the same diameter of the piece that I'm going to put in there, and I'm just kind of making sure that there's enough room up top for it. Get a little sandpaper on here. Not worried about that area in the very top center where the hole in the marks are, because they're going to be covered up. A little bit more of the Axe abrasive paste. Great stuff, by the way. Great value. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. I just like the product. Such pretty wood. So time to put it all together. And last thing I needed to do was to set a little recess in the very top for the little emblem, which you will see in the finished pics. So hopefully you stick around for that. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Hey, if you haven't already, hit that that notification bell so you know when the videos are coming out. I really appreciate the support everybody is giving. And please leave a comment. Tell me what you think about the design. I love reading everything, good and bad, that people write. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Welcome back, friends. So I decided to grab some scraps that I had in my shop and try something I had never done before. I'm going to get these all glued up. I don't know how it's going to turn because different species turn differently, but you know, how bad could it be? Little technical difficulty with the glue here. Turns out glue gets hard when you don't use it very often. Who knew? We'll carry on and see if we can get these to stay together.
Good morning. Well, today we've got a nice piece of Osage orange, walnut, and birch. I've obviously taken the corners off already. It's measuring about 4.5 inches high by about 8 inches across, and we'll see if we can make something nice. Stay tuned.
So the first thing we need to do is get this piece secured to the lathe. We're going to use a faceplate and make sure it stays on the lathe. I'm going to start by taking this outside corner and start getting us into round, so I can ultimately turn the speed up a little bit and make my cuts a lot easier. Flattening the bottom just a bit for the same purpose. So this is my very first glue up that I've ever done. Again, I'm rather new to wood turning, everyone, and it was neat to, as I smoothed this out, to see how the three species of wood were laying together. It was really kind of cool. Maybe not new for you guys, but new for me. I'm going to start establishing my tenon and foot so I can get this turned around and put in the chuck the other direction. Really make sure that you've got a clean tenon or a clean recess or mortise for the chuck to hold on to. Don't skimp on that detail. I'm going to start working on my shape now, and I'm kind of deciding that I'd like to have a little bit more of a wider opening, but have it go a little bit more narrow toward the bottom. There are a couple decent cracks I'm noticing in here that I will have to address later, but hopefully they don't become an issue. Again, just a little bit more scooping out so I can kind of get closer to that shape that I have in my mind. I'm going to try a little CA glue on the outside here and see if we can fill those cracks. I don't get the feeling they're going really deep, but they are rough enough to where I definitely wanted to smooth them out. I'm going to use a negative rake scraper to kind of clean up, get rid of that CA glue, and hopefully some of the tool marks. Do a little sanding. I always go to about 400 grit, and then my kind of standby fine steel wool, medium Scotch pad, and fine Scotch pad. Gives me a really nice smooth surface, and I do this before I do any sanding paste or anything like that. Really loving the grain, especially on that Osage orange. It's really pretty. I'm going to use a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to clean the grain, make sure I've got no dust or anything like that. It also gets the grain fibers to stand up and get it ready for the sanding paste. Also gives us a nice first look at what this will look like when it's finished. We're going to turn this around and get that faceplate off and get it in the chuck and start working on the other end. Flattening the top just a little bit here again so I can increase my speed and then start working on my hollowing. This is my first time turning Osage orange as well as the other two species. Well, I've turned those before, but not Osage orange. And I was told that it was hard as a rock, and it is rather hard, dense wood, and it was going to be very difficult to turn. I did not find that. I just took it easy, made sure my gouge was sharp, and it turned very, very easily, to be honest. I tend to like setting the thickness of my side walls before I eliminate the bulk in the center because it helps those side walls to not flex, because once they get thin they start flexing with the RPMs of the lathe. I'm going to set my depth now, see how far down I can go with my very high-tech depth finder tool. And we're going to use a skew just to kind of smooth out some of the lines and also hit those edges just a little bit. I tend to not like the real sharp edges. I just don't think it's pleasant to hold on to when you pick a piece up. I ran some black CA in the middle, or excuse me, on the inside, and because it already had some really deep, dark lines in there anyway, and I thought I'll secure those cracks with the black CA, and actually glad I used that because it came out really pretty. You'll see toward the end. Negative rake scraper to just kind of smooth things out and get rid of the last of any of that CA glue. And we'll start sanding process again from about 120 up to 400. And then I'll use my Scotch pad and steel wool. Gonna go ahead and use some sanding paste. This is the Brad's sanding paste, by the way. I like this product a lot. Brings out the color, but also gets us up to about 1,000 grit surface when you're done. Put it on and wipe it off. When you see nothing on your paper towel, you know that you've gotten it all off. Pretty simple. We're going to turn this around now and get rid of that tenon and finish up the bottom of this piece. Again, I will almost always leave the little nub in the middle because I'm just going to take it to the drill press and drill out that nub at the exact size for my branding token that I had made. So I've done that, and a little more CA glue. Again, I just grab the black and the branding token goes on. I'm going to use some of the Brad's tongue oil on this to finish it. Again, really like this product. It's very reasonable as far as price, and a little goes a long way. Leave it on for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then just wipe off your excess. And you obviously can do multiple coats if you like. Folks, I really appreciate everybody watching, spending your time. The finished photos are coming up. Check out my Etsy store. It's in the description and on the channel. And some of the pieces that I've made in the past and will be making will be for sale. And consider subscribing if you would. And again, I really appreciate all the support. Have a great day, and thank you again for watching. Well, everyone, today we're going to be working with something, I don't know what it is. The gentleman I got this from called it Tanner Oak, but I've looked into it and there kind of is no such thing. So I'm really hoping you guys can help me identify it. We're going to put it on the lathe. We're going to make something nice out of it, I hope. It's got some beautiful spalting. But I just don't know what the species is. So anyway, as we go forward, if you guys can comment and tell me what you think it is, I'd really appreciate it. But anyway, here we go. Well, hey there, friends. Well, here we go again for another turning. We're going to start by finding center on this piece, and we're going to put it between centers and get it on the lathe so we can start seeing what is underneath all this crazy features and textures of this mystery wood. Start working on the outside edge, and again, trying to get it into round. Start working on the bottom and getting that a little bit more flat as well. I'm using almost predominantly a 1/2-inch bowl gouge on this piece. Again, as I said in the very beginning, I have no idea what species of wood this is. Just that it was beautiful and had so much character to it. So wanted to see what was underneath and inside and see what I can make out of it. But boy, oh boy, the whole time just trying to figure out what it is. wasn't particularly hard or dense, although it definitely is a hardwood, but simple to turn, but just no idea what it is. Gonna get it round all the way and start figuring out what shape we're gonna take here. Kind of at this point deciding that I wanted to have a little bit more of a traditional bowl shape on this piece, and which means I'm gonna bring it in toward the bottom a little bit closer. I decided I would do a recess on this because I really, the whole time I'm turning this, I just didn't want to lose any more of this piece of wood than I needed to. So I didn't want to do a tenon because it would make my piece a little shorter. Using some shear scraping cuts to help define the shape and also remove any of the tool lines that I may have inadvertently left on the piece. At this point I'm kind of going, holy smokes, this stuff is cool. We're going to do a little sanding. Usually take this to about a 400 grit before I go into using my fine steel wool and medium Scotch pad and fine Scotch pad. And I'll do those prior to doing any kind of sanding paste or anything like that. Yeah, right. I mean, geez Louise. How cool is that? We're going to give it a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to clean up all the dust and anything else that might be left on the piece, and also gives us a nice first look of what this will look like when it's completed. Yeah, wow. Loving this. I'm going to use a little bit of the Brad's sanding paste, bring up the speed a little bit, buff it so it's smooth, and then wipe it off on a clean portion of my paper towel so you can't see any left. Time to turn this around and get it into the chuck so we can start working on the top and start hollowing out. Getting this top and round was a little bit challenging for some reason. I think again I was trying to not go too aggressive on my cuts because I wanted to leave as much of this piece of wood as possible. We're going to start hollowing now again with the 1/2 inch bowl gouge and start establishing our wall thickness and the depth that we will ultimately have. The piece turned actually very well. No issues or troubles, and I didn't run into any big cracks on the inside, no surprises. So for a change, that was really nice. I think I've said before, I tend to like to establish a lot of the wall thickness before I remove a lot of the bulk in the center, because that center bulk is what helps to make sure the side walls don't flex so much. once those sidewalls get thin, going back to try to smooth them out and that sort of thing when they are flexing at about 1,000 RPMs, it's really, really difficult. I'm going to go in with a carbide to do a lot of this bottom work. I need to actually get myself a bottom bowl gouge. Toward the end of this hollowing process, I'm going to use my negative rake scraper and really smooth things out a little bit, get rid of any tool marks, and also take a little bit of more bulk off the very bottoms. We're going to start our sanding process, and again up to about 400 grit, and then we'll use the Scotch pad and the fine steel wool. Use a little bit more of the isopropyl alcohol to clean off any dust or anything, and also give us a nice look at all that amazing spalting on the inside as well. Going to use a little bit more of the Brad's sanding paste. Smooth out that inside even more. Give it a really nice clean surface before we do any tung oil or anything like that. So I'm going to turn this around now and see if we can get rid of that center tenon that I have in there, and that will just leave us with the recess or the mortise. I'll go at the end and take this to the drill press and drill out that nub just the right size so I can put my branding emblem in at the very end. Doing that now. A little bit of CA. Why am I using black? Because I ran out of the clear. Spray the activator on the back of the wood token. Makes it set up really, really quick. And there we have it. Guys, I really want to thank everybody, as always, for taking the time, especially if you've gotten all the way to the end here, watching the video and showing support. I am brand new to wood turning and to YouTube, and it is really, really appreciated. All your comments and likes and supports that you've given me. Don't forget to comment on the bottom, please. I really would love to know what this species of wood is, and there's a lot of people out there with a ton more experience than me, so leave your comments below. This piece and several others that I've done will be for sale on my Etsy store, and that link is in the description. Thank you again for your support, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Well, hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Today we are working with a beautiful blank of monkey pod. I had never heard of this. I'm sure a lot of you have, but when I saw the color and the grain, I had to grab it. And anyway, really excited to get past all this wax and see what's on the inside. So we're going to get rolling and see what we can make of it. So after trimming off the corners a little bit, going to put this between centers and again see if we can get a lot of this wax gone and get to the point where we can put a tenon on this and turn it around and put it in a chuck. Just a quick note on wax: if you folks ever get a piece or a blank that is sealed like this one was, make sure that once you turn the wax off, you stop, sweep up, and then continue, because boy oh boy, when the wax mixes with the shavings, it gets really slippery and you could end up on your rear end. Of course, I would never know from experience, just it's what I've heard. Starting to get a little tenon going here and really flatten out the bottom, and we'll see what kind of shape that I can get this thing going toward. The turning of this hardwood was actually very nice. It cooperated well. It wasn't catchy or anything like that. So very, very pleasurable. Got it now pretty trued up, and we're gonna start getting rid of some of these corners and establishing a little bit of a foot, and again going more toward a shape. The coloring on this blank was really beautiful from the very beginning. Really anxious to kind of get it smoothed out more and really see what it would look like. I decided to kind of scoop it out and toward the center and have a little bit more of a wide rim. It's my negative rake scraper, and it really cleans things up nicely. I won't show you a whole bunch of the sanding, but I usually take things to about a 400 grit all the way up to there, and then I'll go through with a very fine steel wool and a medium Scotch pad, and then a very fine Scotch pad, just to give me a really smooth surface before I do any kind of sanding paste or anything like that. Terrific color. Boy oh boy. So this is my very first time using Axe, the abrasive paste. It actually did very well. It didn't gum up. I'm not sponsored, of course, by them. I just am trying different products as I'm going along to see what I like best. Axe also has a nice carnauba wax polish and turn up the speed, and boy, it gave a terrific shine and it was very easy to work with. Try it if you haven't already. So now we're going to get this turned around, put it in the chuck, and see if we can start working on the inside. Again, this had a lot of wax on this portion, so off camera I stopped, swept up, and cleaned things up a little bit before I really went and did a whole lot. I've moved on from a 1/2 inch bowl gouge to a 3/8 inch bowl gouge. I found it was biting into the wood a little nicer, a little cleaner. So that's why I did that. Starting to really establish my wall thickness. And again, I try to establish the wall thickness before I go down further and take out center mass because the walls tend to flex when they start getting thin, and it's really hard to go back and get a clean line on those thinner walls once you've taken the center out. So try to really get them where I want them to be so I don't have to go back to them. Works out real well. Thank you, Kent, from Turn a Wood Bowl, his channel, for teaching me that. Getting our depth set now, and then we'll really start kind of fine-tuning this shape. Using the trusty finger calipers here to make sure that my walls are even. And then we're going to do a little sanding, again up to about 400 grit, and then my steel wool and Scotch pad process that I tend to like a lot. We're going to go through and put a little bit more of the Axe abrasive paste on the inside here and on the outside edge, which I kind of tuned up a little bit, so I kind of had to go back and finish that off once again. And then we'll also go through with the Axe carnauba wax polish. Excuse me. Really pretty stuff. Had a ton of chatoyance to it. When you moved it, you could see the water, the lines reflecting off the light. Couldn't wait to get this outside and see it in the sunlight. Now, next order of business, we're going to get that tenon gone and clean up and finish the bottom so we can complete this piece entirely. I've said it in my previous videos, I tend to leave that nub and I'll get rid of it at the drill press, and I just kind of drill out for my specific size of branding emblem, so I don't have to feel compelled to get rid of the nub. I just clean up the bottom, make sure it's concaved, and deal with that little thing at the drill press. Easy peasy. Now that we have that bottom concaved, just want to sand it up nicely, and off camera I did the same thing with the steel wool and the Scotch pads, and made it nice and finished as well. Thank you again for watching. Stick around for the after photos. They are coming up next, and again, thank you so much.